So I'm going to go through a basic configuration of Nagios just to get 3 or 4 servers up and running and reporting, or rather Nagios connecting to them and reporting statuses on services and uptime and all that. Hopefully it's not too confusing. It is a little bit convoluted at first, trying to figure out where everything is and just understanding how the config files work. Once you get used to where everything is, it's fairly simple to add new servers or change the services that you're monitoring. So hopefully I can explain this well. The first thing we're going to want to do is set up our contacts. We want to set where the email alerts are going to go to. So you do that in this contacts.cfg file. And this is the one we want to change right here. It's not a valid email address, but just to show you an example, that's where you would change your email address. There's other things that you can do in here that I haven't played with yet, but that change right there will get email coming to you. So we can close this out now. The other thing we're going to want to do is edit this commands.cfg, and we need to edit one of the check commands. We're going to be using a piece of software called NS Client++ that gets installed on the Windows servers, and this runs as a service on the Windows servers and allows the Nagios client to connect to it and pull information out that we want to retrieve and display in the web config, or the web interface. So we need to go down to we need to find the check NT right here, the check NT command definition, and we need to add a password. The NS Client++ has a spot where you can put in a password, and then the Nagios server has to provide this password in order to connect to the client. So I'm going to go ahead and add in a password that I've already created with just a random password generator. I've got that saved. Where did I have it? Usually just put it in a text file and put it right alongside the NS Client++. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to back over to my config here, and I need to add a line, or add a switch right here. We're going to do an S. What did that just do? That didn't copy what I wanted, so I need to because I can't copy across the you can't copy out of the console connection for Hyper-V. It doesn't let you do that, so I'm going to have to just type it in here. This right here, the -P and this number here, that's where you define the port that the check NT is going to connect on. So if you wanted to, you could change the port that the NS Client++ is using. It may not be a bad idea. Alright, so I've got my password in there, so we can go ahead and close this out. So we've edited contacts.cfg, added an email address, then we've edited commands.cfg and put in a password that we're going to use on each of the Windows servers that we installed the client on. And we need to do a couple more things here. Let's look at templates.cfg. Now in here we have host templates. This is where you can change things like enabling or disabling notifications, flap detection. If it detects that the service is going up and down, it's not going to send you an email every single time it goes up and down. It's just going to make note that it's going up and down and not be too annoying about it. What else can we set in here? Notification period, so if you only wanted like 8x5 or whatever your SLA requires you to monitor. I think most places probably do 24/7. You want to know if something's down regardless of the time, so I don't change that one. Then we have different definitions, or different host definitions based on what kind of host it is. So for example, here's a Linux host definition, and down here is a Windows host definition. And so also part of the host definition, you've got the name of the host template, which is Windows-server in this case, and then down here you also have a host group. And it's also Windows-server. Now host groups allow you to group computers however you want. So for example, if you want all your domain controllers grouped together, you want all your Exchange servers grouped together, you can do that by putting them in host groups. So you define the host group here. And so if I wanted a domain controllers host group, let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to copy this because everything else is going to be the same. Paste it here. We'll change the host template to domain controllers. You definitely have to be careful on spelling and caps, because it is obviously it's Linux, and case does make a difference. And we're going to change the host group. You can also do things like contact groups. So for example, you have your domain controllers in a host group, and you assign your domain controllers to this template, and you wanted only certain people to get emails if a domain controller goes down. You could create a group of your Active Directory admins or whatever and only send it to those people. So you could have your Exchange admins getting emails for Exchange, you could have your Active Directory admins getting emails for domain controllers, split it up however you want to. I've got a couple other host groups I'm going to set up here. So I'm going to do domain controllers, SQL servers, and Exchange servers. So I'm going to copy this a couple more times. So we've done domain controllers. We'll do SQL servers. And we'll paste it one more time and do Exchange servers. Alright, so now we can close this out. Now we need to... Now there's two ways you can define these host groups. The way I do it is I create a hostgroups.cfg file and put the host groups in there. The other way you can do it is you can copy the host group definition and put it in the file, the config file for your server. I find it's easier to create a host groups config file on its own, just because I have quite a few of them in my configuration. I have a different host group for each customer and for each site, so I have probably 8 or 10 different host groups in my configuration. So I'm just going to go ahead and do the same thing in our test environment here. So I'm going to create a host groups .cfg, and I'm going to paste this in here. One thing you got to watch out for when copying and pasting is it seems to cut or not paste everything correctly, and then you end up with these uncommented out characters here, and that will break your Nagios config. It won't like that. It won't start the service if it's broken like that. So I'm just gonna delete that out. So now I've got my 3 host groups defined. And so we can save this. And anytime you create a new config file, you need to go into the nagios.cfg file and tell Nagios that there's a new config file it needs to look at. So I need to add the path to that host groups .cfg file we just created. Alright, now we can close that out for now. We'll be back in there. Now in here, the way I set up each server is I create a config file per device that I'm monitoring. When I first set Nagios up, I had everything just in one huge config file, which it worked, but anytime you had to go in and modify something or add a server or change a service, you were scrolling through this gigantic config file. So I ended up cleaning it up and splitting everything out, and now I just do a config file per device that I'm monitoring. So generally what I do is I'll create a directory called hosts, and obviously there's nothing in here yet. So the first server that I'm going to set up for monitoring, let's just do the domain controller here. And so the computer name of this domain controller is dc1.test.com. I always make my config files and name them after the server, so I'm just going to do dc1.cfg. Oops. And now I have some pre-set up templates here. So you've got one here for domain controllers. What I do, so here's where you're defining the host that you're going to check. Here's where you tell it what template to use. And I see I need to fix that because domain controllers is not caps. And then anything that says change me needs to be changed to whatever server you're going to be monitoring. So I'm going to do a replace. I'm going to replace it with DC1. Alright, so this is the template it's using, domain controllers, which is going to make it a member of the host group domain controllers. This is the host name. This is the address. It's going to use DNS and resolve this name to an address. And then here are the services that it's going to check. It's going to check Active Directory domain services. It's going to check disk usage of the C drive. It's going to give us a warning at 80% of the drive used, and at 90% used it's going to give you a critical warning. CPU load of DC1, and then you have your 80 and 90% thresholds again. DHCP service, DC1 DHCP server. It's going to check that the service is up and running. DNS is going to check that the service is up and running. Memory usage, again, warning at 80%, critical at 90%. This one checks the NS Client++ version, and this one here checks your uptime. You could add whatever services you want to check on this. If you had a IIS running on this domain controller for some reason, you could define another service to check that the IIS service is up and running. But this is all I need for demo purposes, so I'm just going to do a copy and we'll paste it over here. And again, I see that it didn't paste quite right, so I'm going to delete those 2 extra characters. And I should be able to save this and close it out. Oops. Escape. Alright, another server I'm going to be monitoring. File server. So this one is fs1.cfg. And we'll use the basic server template for this one. This is that default template that was set up, the Windows Server template. So that's fine, I'm just going to use that one. And we're going to change, we're going to do a find and replace on change me. fs1. I'm going to change this alias because I want something more descriptive. The alias can be whatever you want. I'll just make it file server. Again, we're going to check the disk usage, CPU load, mem usage, NS client version, and uptime. For a file server, you may have multiple volumes you're checking, so basically you would just copy this and add C, D, E, F, whatever you need, whatever volumes you need to check. You might also monitor something like DFS, DFSR on a file server. But other than that, there's usually not too much else to monitor. On a file server, this one is great. It tells you when you're getting close to capacity on any of your volumes. So this looks good for this server. Do a copy, paste. I need to fix this again. And we'll save it. Next server is going to be SQL. And this server should be SQL1. .cfg. And I'm going to open my SQL Server template. Oops, we need to change stuff first here. So I'm going to change this template to SQL servers, and I'm going to do a find and replace on change me. Replace it with SQL1. And now you can see when I created this template, I was monitoring other volumes on whatever server I copied this from. So I'm monitoring C, F, and E. Well, this virtual machine only has a C drive, so I'm going to go ahead and delete those two service checks. CPU load, mem use, and its client. And now here's the SQL service check. And basically right here is where you define the name of the service to check. And then you provide a description for your service. So you could check any service on the server just by changing this and then adding the description. So we're checking SQL Server service and also the SQL Server browser, which I don't think I have running on the SQL Server. Let's look. SQL Server browser, so let's start that. Okay. So I'm going to copy. Oh, this one is also checking IIS, which I do not have on that server, so I'll delete that. Copy. Save it. And the last server I'm going to monitor here is this Exchange 2010 server. And this one I named EX1. Go over my templates again. Do a replace EX1. Again, I had been monitoring other volumes on a real Exchange server. I only need to monitor the C volume on this in this test environment. Here's my Exchange services that it's monitoring. Only monitoring the information store and the transport service. Uptime, and obviously IIS for a CAS server. I think that looks good. Copy it, paste. Oh, I want to change this as well here. And what did I call those? Exchange servers. Servers. Okay. So that's good to save. So now I've got my 4 servers in here that I'm going to monitor. One config file for each one. Now, remember I've added config files, so I need to go back and tell Nagios that there's new config files it needs to check. So we need to look at the nagios.cfg file. And you can split this up however you want to. I'll list them under the Windows machine here. So objects, and then my host directory that I created, and then dc1.cfg. And we can do a copy and paste on this too, it might be a little easier. So we'll go change this. FS1, SQL1, and EX1 are the 4 servers. So I can close that. And at this point, I think we're ready to check the configuration and see if we have any errors that we need to fix. So there's a command here you can run that will run through all those config files and see if there's any problems with them. And we do have a problem. Okay, so what it's saying right here, template exchange servers specified in host definition already found. So let's go look at this config file. So define host exchange servers. Alright, so that looks right in this file. Let's quit out of here. Let's go back up a directory. Let's look at our host groups config file. So my host group exchange servers is correct. Let's close this out and look at templates. Alright, here's the problem. So I told the ex1.cfg file in there where I was defining the host, I told it to use the exchange-servers plural template. Well, here I have the exchange server without the S on the end template. So if I add an S here and X out and rerun our config check, you should have some better luck. Alright. So we have a problem now with the Windows server, and I think I know what that is. Let's look at templates again. And here it is again, it's missing an S. By default it's just Windows Server. I'll add the S onto here just to be consistent. And we'll close it out and run our config check again. Okay. So I need to go into our host groups and define that Windows Server host group. Template Windows Server. Let's look at the FS1 config again. Okay, I didn't change this and add the S on the end. Close this out again. And I think we still need to go into our host groups config and define the Windows Server. So I'm going to copy this definition, paste it, and we'll change this to Windows Servers, Windows Servers. We'll save and exit. Run this again, and that's what we want to see. So it's saying we don't have any warnings or any errors, and we can go ahead and restart the Nagios service. Alright, let's go over to this domain controller where I've got the system pulled up. Let's refresh. Okay, so we have another error that I see quite a bit. To fix this, we need to check our CGI configuration file. So here's our CGI.cfg. Alright, and here's our issue. So right here is where you tell, this is where you define what users have access to which pieces of information that Nagios provides. When we set up the user for Nagios, we called the user admin, not Nagios admin. So you're able to log into the page, but you're not able to see any information. So if I change these entries to admin, should be it. We can save it, and we can go over here and refresh again, and now we see that we have access. So that's something to keep in mind if you ever add new users. You have to go into the CGI config and give them permission to whatever you want them to be able to do. So we can see that it's getting to these hosts, but let's look at the services view, because we shouldn't be able to check any services yet because we haven't installed the client on any of the servers. So we're going to see a lot of warnings here. This is the only one that's working because this is the local host check. This is the one that's configured by default when you install Nagios. So we're already seeing that it's doing critical because it can't connect to the NS Client++ and pull the information that it's supposed to. So we've got all our servers and services listed in here. Now we need to go install this client. So let's do that. We'll start with the domain controller here. And we're going to need this. And we want to run... Let's unblock that first. And I want to make sure I run it as an administrator, so I'm going to launch this from an elevated command prompt. I just have this install file sitting out on a share along with the password. I'm going to go ahead and copy it down to the local drive through to the C. It's just easier. And then I will do an elevated command prompt here. And we'll launch that. All of this can be default. Allowed hosts. So this, not only can you have a password here, you can only allow a specific host to connect, which is just another layer of security. You know, though IP addresses can be spoofed, it's not a bad idea to have it in there anyway. So our Nagios server is 10.10.2.5, and that's a static IP, so I'm going to go ahead and put in 10.10.2.5. And then I'm going to paste in the password. And then I'm going to enable everything except NSCA. And then we'll hit next and install. And we want to start the service. Now, we also need to open up port 12489 on the firewall. So we're going to say, oh, see if we can force a check on this. Invalid password. Well, for simplicity's sake, let's go back and just change that password to something simple. Or I can just check it real quick and see what I've got wrong. Okay, that V should be a caps. Just restart the Nagios service real quick. Give it a few seconds. Okay. Alright, so it's working. So I guess the latest NS Client++ must add its own rules. I don't think the previous version did, because I've always had to manually add inbound rules for that to work. So I guess that's kind of nice. It's a step you don't have to worry about. So we can go ahead and go to the rest of our servers here and install this client. And we'll do the elevated command prompt again. Oops. Start service. SQL Server. And certainly you could script all of this and do a push if you had a large amount of servers to install this on. And last one. Alright, let's refresh this and see what it looks like. Alright, so for FS1 it's picking this up. Time is working. Time is working on Exchange. Let's just do a force. Alright, so Exchange is all the way up. File server is good. Now we are seeing a warning on this Exchange server about the memory usage, and probably has something to do with the fact that I only gave it 512 megs of RAM. Alright, everything is up. Now I see one down here, SQL. Alright, so that just means the firewall is blocking ping. So I can go over to SQL1. So this command allows ICMP. Let's see if we can go ping it now. Now we can ping SQL1, and that should resolve our host down status. Let's check this. Alright, everything is green. We've still got our two warnings, HTTP on the local host and memory usage on our test Exchange server. That's fine. So that's pretty much a basic config of Nagios. Once you have your layout defined and set up, it's really not too bad to manage. You know, you just go in every once in a while to add a new server or pull an old one out, or change a service that you're monitoring, or maybe change some of the parameters. Change your warning thresholds or critical thresholds, but it's really a great product to have running. After you've been up and running for a while, you can do some reporting. It'll calculate uptimes for you. You can look through your notification logs. You can see trends on your alerts. Just all kinds of stuff you can do with this. So I think it's a good product to have up and running in the environment.